Hi, everybody. Welcome to the CodeHS webinar on how to prepare students for the AP Java exam. I am one of your hosts today. My name is Alex Ecker. I'm a curriculum developer, and joining me today is Dave.
Yeah, hello, I'm David Burnham, and I'm also a curriculum developer, and the two of us work on the Java content for CodeHS.
For this webinar, we're going to cover several things. First off, we're going to talk about the modified AP test format, what we need to know in order to get our students prepared for that. Second, the available resources that we have on the site to help you get prepared for the AP test. And lastly, we're going to have an open discussion for you all to kind of discuss different tips and tricks that you all have been working on to get your students prepared, especially given the fact that a lot of us are now working in an offline situation. Collaboration is really key to getting everybody prepared adequately. So we'll be having an open discussion at the end. The beginning of this webinar will just start with us kind of talking through some of the resources that we have on the site. And then lastly, we will then open up a new conversation where you all will be able to have a discussion together, mediated by myself and some of the other CodeHS staff. I do see a question about whether or not the slides will be shared after the video conference. The answer is yes. Those slides will be shared to everybody who is participating in the webinar. It'll also be recorded and online in the CodeHS knowledge base. So if you miss something, don't worry. You'll be able to see all of the information at a later time.
All right, so we're going to go through a little bit about the exam breakout, and hopefully this is not new information for you, but we can talk about what we've heard and what has been posted by College Board. So at this point, we've not heard anything new about the exam. Everything that we know about the exam has been published by College Board, and we have no more information than what they've put out. So what we have heard is that the exam is 45 minutes long and is only going to contain FRQ questions. In the past, FRQ questions have been about 22 minutes each, so you would think there'd be 2 FRQ questions, but at this point, I wouldn't necessarily say that that's going to be the case. There's a decent chance that the FRQ format may be different, so we can't necessarily count on 2 FRQ questions to fill up that 45 minutes. We know that students will be able to complete this at home, and it can be completed online, or I'm sorry, it can be completed offline. And we also know that the content is going to be limited to just units 1 through 7. So several concepts will be out of scope, such as 2D arrays, inheritance, recursion, binary searches, and merge sorts. Okay, College Board has also told us that they're going to release more information this Friday in regards to the time of the exam and the format of the exam. They previously communicated that there'll be at least 2 dates and suggested that students would have the option of when to test. So this means you could have some of your class testing earlier and some of your class testing later. And they're going to post these updates on their website on Friday. So in the meantime, let's talk about some of the resources that you have available for your students to help research or help to review. So we have several resources on CodeHS that we want to go through, and then we'll also talk about some external resources. So first of all, let's take a look at each of these. We're going to take a look at the Nitro and Mocha courses. So if you've been taking, or if you've been going through Nitro with your students, you may want to take the opportunity to go through Mocha. While there are some exercises that overlap between the two, there's a lot that don't. So for example, if you are completing Nitro Module 5 writing classes and you want to get your students some more practice, you can actually go over and find exercises and lessons from the Mocha Module 4, which is also called classes. So by going back and forth, you can provide your students with additional practice. And remember, in the assignments feature, you can actually go ahead and add these right into their class so that they fit in seamlessly. Now do keep in mind that Mocha uses the run method and Nitro uses the main method. So there's a few differences there. Okay. We also just launched the 2019-2020 review course a few weeks ago. And this course is laid out by units similar to what is on the Nitro course. And it also matches up to the units for College Board. Each of these has some practice multiple choice questions, as well as about 10 short response unit test type of questions. Now, some of them are out of scope, and we know that the multiple choice questions are out of scope. But right now, this 2019 and 2020 review course still have all of that content in there. Also, if you're not aware, we recently launched the CodeHS Practice site, which gives students the ability to practice various types of problems. These are all unit test-based problems and cover a variety of topics. Some of the questions that are in this site may be out of scope for the test, but it's still a great opportunity to practice some questions here. And then finally, we are going to be launching a modified review course either later this week or early next week that's going to be following the new format for the exam. So the difference between this course and the course that we launched a few weeks ago is mainly that we are taking all of the questions, the multiple choice questions, and putting them in the supplemental material, as well as all of the units 8, 9, and 10 resources. They'll all be moved to supplemental. The one place that we are going to add new content is that we are going to put several new FRQ questions into this exam. And the format is going to really be following a little bit different format where the students are going to be writing more of a free-form text. They're not actually going to be writing against test cases for the first part. And then they can go from there and copy and paste their code into another exercise that allows them to check it. But the starting part is not going to have them running and checking their answers as they go. It's going to be more like what they would do on a test, which is writing without having the ability to run and check to see if things are going correctly. Okay, so in addition to these internal resources, I wanted to point out some external resources that you have available. First of all is the AP Classroom, as several of you guys have used throughout the year. You can find multiple choice and free response questions there. College Board is also kicking off review sessions with students, and they have different topics that they post on their website, and so you can have your students take advantage of these classes. I know the first one is coming up, I believe, this week, and it does cover inheritance, which is not going to be on the test, but I believe they're going to circle back and hold these more content specific to the test going forward. You can also find all the past FRQ questions available online, and one thing to note is it's very easy to Google and find a printed version of these tests, but it's also very easy for your students to Google and find the solutions to each of these FRQ questions. So they're a great resource for students to test and practice, but they're not necessarily a great resource for you to use as graded content since the answers are freely available. And finally, there's several groups out there that allow teachers to share resources, and you should definitely take advantage of these. Some of the more popular ones are the AP community on College Board's website. And then there's also a couple Facebook groups. One of the most active is the Facebook AP CSA teachers group, and a lot of people are sharing resources on those pages.
All right, and lastly, what we want to talk about is coming up with some online teacher tips that can make virtual teaching a little bit easier, especially when trying to prepare students for an exam. So for most students, the current online setup might be foreign and confusing, and they might lose motivation to continue learning as a result. One thing that we think is really important is to remind them that many colleges rely on online tests, lectures, and sometimes full courses that they can get credit from. And that this experience right now will help them get prepared for some of the online learning environments that they'll likely experience in college. In order to maintain some of that rigor and accountability for students, it's important to establish structures that will allow them to stay on task. So consider providing checklists for students that list the activities or exercises that you expect them to complete by the end of the week, or even creating an Excel sheet that allows them to check off the assignments that you'd like them to finish so that you and your students have a visible sense of where they're at, and not just on CodeHS Resources, but in regards to any of the resources or exercises you want them to complete for credit. It's also important that you determine the appropriate software that you'll use to help communicate with your students. In addition to the video conferencing software that you decide to use, consider using software to create quick videos or screencasts to show exemplary work or to guide students through exercises, and ways that students can also share videos to update you on their progress and coding practice. So apps like LifeCap and QuickTime allow for easy screencasting ability and screen recording. And Flipgrid is a great way to get students to share their own videos with each other and with you as the teacher. And then lastly, consider holding office hours so students can get one-on-one time with you to answer any questions that they might be having. Given how impersonal video calls and conferencing can be, this can help to engage students who otherwise might be left to struggle on their own. It'll also give you opportunities to work with students who might be struggling with specific content. So having office hours specifically for maybe array lists or for arrays, and having students who are curious about those particular sections, but don't, they just need a specific work, but other students don't. I think holding office hours can be a really awesome way to engage certain students while letting others kind of work on their own. So thinking about some of those things. In addition to just some of these online teacher tips, if you'd like more information on how to improve your virtual setup, you can find a lot more information at codehs.com/virtual. Here you can learn all about setting students up for success with virtual learning, communication and assigning work in virtual classrooms, how to track student work, preparing for and leading live virtual lessons, and a ton of other CodeHS resources that we have on the site. So if you have yet to visit this page, I highly recommend it. There's a ton of amazing resources on how to improve your virtual setup, as well as free access to Pro for CodeHS until 30th. So if you have yet to take advantage of this, you have access to all CodeHS Pro features up to June 30th by going to this link and signing up. So I highly recommend that for teachers who are still trying to figure out their virtual setup or who would like a little bit more recommendations and ideas. At this point in the webinar, we'd like to just take some time to answer any questions that people might have. Please feel free to write them in the Q&A box, and we will either answer them live or we'll type an answer out. So I'll wait a couple of minutes just to see if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask.
So one question that came up was about students trying to use CodeHS on iPads and iPhones. And we are actually trying to build our course out, or our website out, a little bit better for these types of resources, but it's still not ideal. I think iPads work a little bit better than phones. But yeah, it's tough with the keyboard kind of coming up and blocking. So right now we are working on making it better, but it's not necessarily that easy.
So I see another question here about when we're launching the modified 2020 review course. We're going to launch that as soon as we get more information from the College Board about what the FRQs are going to look like. So the idea is that will probably be released at the end of this week or sometime in the middle of next week. So once we find more information out from College Board, that's when we'll release the modified exam.
There's a question about AP students typing out or writing answers. I believe that they've said that you can write answers. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to type them in, but I thought I saw someplace where they said students could handwrite and take a picture and submit that way. And so I believe handwritten is an option. I'm not sure if it's a required option though. Yeah, so other FRQ questions that we have, there are some throughout the courses, but right now we haven't separated them out by what is in scope versus out of scope for the current modified scope. So we're going to be working on making sure that there's a list of FRQ questions that are aimed specifically at the in scope portion of this test with that modified class. But there are other resources out there in our site, particularly I know in MOCA we have a few that you can go through that way.
I see a question here about if I have a mini class plan, will I be able to add the extra courses? The answer is yes. All of these courses are available for free to all teachers. And if you go to the virtual homepage and sign up for Pro for free for the rest of the school year, then you'll have access to all of those courses as well. So everything that that we've talked about so far in this webinar is free and accessible to all teachers. and all students. So you don't have to worry about what sort of plan you have. All of this stuff is available for you.
Additional question on the modified review. So the modified review, there are no new multiple choice questions. The modified review is basically going to take the existing review course that we have, and we moved all of the multiple choice into supplemental, and we moved all of the out of scope sections into supplemental. And what we also did was, the other thing we're adding is FRQ questions that should hopefully be similar. Now, if you look at the current course, there's some practice problems that are unit test type of problems. Those are going to be the same in this modified course, but we are adding new FRQ questions. So you could actually assign the review course now, and then when the modified comes out, you could take that section, the FRQ module, and move it over into your existing review if you want to.
There's another question here just about plagiarism and whether or not we have a plan for something like that. So we actually have cheat detection software on our platform that you can use to help compare the solution code that we have on CodeHS to the answers that your students are creating. So there is a way currently for you to check whether or not your students are plagiarizing. We can't necessarily control whether or not students are plagiarizing with external resources, such as the FRQs that exist on College Board. But in regards to the ones that we're creating and hosting on our site, you'll be able to see whether or not students are completing them at an abnormally fast rate. You'll be able to compare the solution code to the code that students are writing, and be able to compare it to your other students. So we do have the capability for you to kind of check for plagiarism on CodeHS, not so much on external resources.
So a few other questions here. So one, Erica said that College Board video did say that there would be handwriting the FRQs, so that's good to know. We also had a question about accommodations, and I believe that there are addressing accommodations for College Board. I'm not sure exactly how that's working. Another question about whether or not to cover the labs if you have not gotten to them so far. Some of the labs are really good. Magpie is probably a good lab focusing on some content. But again, I would wait, before I do too much with my students, I'd wait and see what they come out with on Friday to specify exactly what that format of the test is. But the labs are a good place since you are getting students to write new methods and modules accordingly.
There's a really interesting question here. Just somebody asked, do you recommend CSA students look at Mocha or Nitro for online review this spring? If you have not been using CodeHS before this week or recently, and you are interested in getting students prepared for the exam, I would recommend going through the Nitro course because that course is structured with the same units and aligned to College Board. And the review course that we are creating also follows the same structure as the Nitro review course. So if you haven't checked out any of the resources yet, I would say Nitro is a safer bet, just so that everything is kind of aligned one-to-one in regards to what you would be looking at in the actual course and what you're looking at in the review compared to what the College Board unit outline looks like. But that's only if you are new to this and want just like a really easy access to the material.
A couple other questions about College Board. So we don't know what the College Board editor is going to necessarily look like. There's a question about, is it open notes? I don't know if they're going to say if it's open notes or not, but I don't know how they can necessarily enforce it not being open notes. And so, I think a bunch of people are very curious as far as how they're going to be putting in cheat detection, how they're going to be moderating this, and we're kind of in the dark, just as you guys are on that. It should be interesting to see what they come out with later this week to say what it's going to be.
And just to clarify, so some people are asking what the difference between Mocha and Nitro is. The primary difference is that Nitro is just the way that we have written the course is without any, so we've added for Mocha, there is an extended console program that allows students to easily write their main, in Nitro, there's public static void main. In Mocha, we have a way of just writing public void run. So it's kind of a condensed version of Java so that students get an easier time writing code immediately. in addition, so that's really the primary difference, is just that there's this extended class that we use to make it a little easier for students to get started. On top of that, Nitro introduces objects much earlier in the course, whereas Mocha introduces objects a little bit later in the course. So at this point in time, you know, your students should know about objects. So it doesn't really matter which course you start with, but generally speaking, if you wanted to teach objects sooner rather than later, you might start with Nitro. And if you wanted to teach objects later, then you would start with Mocha. But so at this point in the year, they don't really have too many fundamental differences. It's just a matter of preference in terms of the ordering that you want to teach the course.
Yeah, so Trevor Packard with College Board, I guess, did tweet out that they are going to be open notes. But like I said, I think there's no way to prevent that. All right, so it looks like questions are kind of wrapping up. So why don't we move over now to our breakout discussions? So based on the format of what we have right now, we can't do the breakout discussions in this chat. So what we're going to do is we're going to have people move over to another Zoom conference. And so if you would like to join us for our meetup chat, where we're going to basically break out into small discussion groups and share some best practices and best tips, then you can head over to this website here. So codehs.com/CSA meetup. So end this webinar, head on over to that one, and then we're going to be splitting up into smaller groups to continue from there. So we hope to see you guys over there. And if not, thank you for participating so far.